Hi, you guys. My name is Jamie, and I want to give you a little bit of information about my argumentation essay. I'm studying Huey P. Long and analyzing whether or not he is a true demagogue. A little history about Huey P. Long. I became fascinated with him when I studied at Louisiana State University. Huey P. Long was one of the most influential characters in Louisiana history. He built the state capitol building, which is in Baton Rouge. He helped build the infrastructure within Louisiana, the roads, the bridges, the highways. He allowed people to get to where they needed to go with little trouble. He also helped the banking system in a time where banks were closing due to the Great Depression. Huey P. Long also helped bring Louisiana State University into a very high level university, and he had an affinity for the Tiger Band, which I was a part of from 1998 to 2003 in the color guard. But Huey P. Long helped build the program, the Golden Band from Tigerland. He walked with them, marched them down the hill, which is a tradition still held today. He built the medical branch of Louisiana State University in New Orleans. He provided free education, free textbooks. He lowered tuition at Louisiana State University, and he brought in scholarship programs. He believed that education should be free and apparent to all. Huey P. Long entered into the political arena in 1918. He became the governor of Louisiana in 1932, and by 1935, he was a Louisiana senator, a Democrat Louisiana senator, and he was running for the presidency against President Roosevelt. He ran on a platform called Share Our Wealth. He had several things that he wanted to do with this program. One, he wanted to redistribute wealth from the government, the politicians, the very small select people that he called the super rich, and redistribute it out to the rest of the nation. The poor people at the time, particularly in Louisiana, there were highly impoverished people. Usually in Louisiana, it was the backwoods Cajuns. And then there were the elites, the rich, the super rich. But even then, at that point, the super rich that Huey P. Long believed to be rich were suffering due to the Great Depression. So what he wanted to do was to make it so that millionaires could only get up to $2 to $3 million a year, and then the rest of that money would go to the government, and the government would redistribute it out. Households that got less than $5,000 would be given the ability to maintain $5,000 with an additional, I think it was $2,500 salary for the year. That sounds very paltry to us, but to them at the time, it was a lot. He believed that every person should have a car, a home, a radio, mostly to listen to him, and that free education should be available for all people. He believed in supporting the veterans and increasing their wages, as well as taking care of disabled vets. Huey P. Long also wanted to provide pension plans for people who were over the age of 60, which would be helped by the government. But the primary thing that he wanted to do was anybody that made between $10,000 up to $3 million a year, he wanted the government to reassess the amount of money that they had, bring it to the government, and then redistribute it out to the people so that everybody was able to, in his words, be a king. One of my primary arguments, or my primary sources, are his two speeches, Share Our Wealth and Every Man a King. I also want to look at the notion of Huey P. Long as a demagogue through the filter of Patricia Roberts Miller. She's one of my secondary sources, where she gives a definition of what demagoguery is. Demagoguery is a polarization of us into them. It's an in-group and out-group. It focuses on policy aspects. It presents a dire situation, and it focuses on the needs aspect. And a lot of people at that time had needs. They were in the Great Depression. They were poor. They were impoverished. They were hungry. So poverty abounded during this time. Huey P. Long, however, didn't attribute the poverty of the Great Depression as the source of the Great Depression. He attributed the cause or the effects of this poverty to the fact that there were people in Washington who had millions of dollars. And that was the backbone behind his Share the Wealth program. Now, I also want to, because in the beginning I said I wanted to see if he was a true demagogue. There's an article by Hogan and Tell called Demagoguery and Demagoguery and Democratic Deliberation, the Search for Rules of Discursive Engagement, where they touch on the aspect of Patricia Robert Miller's definition of demagoguery and apply it to Huey P. Long. Is he a demagogue? Is he a populist? Or is he just under the umbrella of Southern demagoguery, which is something that is put onto people to kind of negate their worth? Huey P. Long does fall under the category of a populist when you look at Hogan and Tell's paper, and also I've got one by T. Williams, The Gentleman from Louisiana, Demagogue or Democrat, and then another article by Glenn Geeson entitled Huey P. Long, A Political Contradiction. So during the time Huey P. Long came into office, he was influenced by factors before him, by the progressive era, by the populist era. Now, populists at the time of Huey P. Long were typically Republicans. And so the label people give to him today of that as a populist is supposed to have a negative connotation such as that of a demagogue. But populists at the time, again, were primarily Republican. Huey P. Long did try to run for presidential candidacy on the ticket of Republican because he wanted to take the Democrat votes away from President Roosevelt. And it was a political strategy for him. He knew that if he ran on the platform as a Republican, he might be able to take away from President Roosevelt. We will never know about that. Both men were very charismatic Democrat leaders at the time. But Huey P. Long had a lot of enemies, and he was assassinated by a man named Weiss, who shot him, I believe, in the belly, and it went through the back, and he had a bullet hole in the back. This part I remember from 1998. And he died because they just simply didn't flip him over and search for any other external wounds. And so he bled out into his belly, into the table, and he died from the assassination. I almost called it an attempted assassination, but it was very successful. The other thing that I want to talk about is this populist slant. Populists did certain things, and they are defined in certain ways. I've got an article by Michael Lee, who says the populist chameleon, the People's Party, Huey Long, George Wallace, and the populist argumentative frame. So it gives a framework for what populism is and how populism is defined and how it is defined to Huey P. Long. What I want to do with my secondary sources is primarily compare and contrast them against Robert Miller's definition of what a demagogue is. I believe if you filter Huey P. Long through Robert Miller's definition of a demagogue, you will come up and find that that's what he is. Now, whether he's just under the umbrella of Southern demagogue or a true demagogue, that's something that's still in the air, but he does definitely fall into the category of a populist. as of right now, that's pretty much where my conclusion is. There's another article that says that he falls under the umbrella of a mass leader, and that was a very interesting find. That was by, I think, Gleason wrote that. Um, and so the idea that he was definitely a leader of Louisiana, definitely a powerhouse in Louisiana, but is he a true demagogue? That is something that I'm hoping by the end of my paper I will figure out. Bye.